Senator Amy Klobuchar is out with a brand new book. It's called Antitrust, taking on monopoly power from the Gilded Age to the digital age. Now, the Minnesota politician explores the history of fighting monopolies in this country and argues failure to reform antitrust laws is hurting us in the process. So joining us now is Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator, such a pleasure to have you back here on Cheddar News. We constantly see Facebook, Google, Amazon, all of them in the headlines. With your new book, how are you really wanting to have people realize the monopoly crisis in this country and that it goes really beyond just one industry here?
Exactly. And when I look at this, it's steeped in history. You know, you've got a country that has forever rejuvenated capitalism by using the antitrust laws. You go way back to our founders, and we didn't have antitrust laws back there. But when you think about the Boston Tea Party, when they were throwing that tea into the harbor, a lot of it was because they didn't want to keep buying from a monopoly tea company, East India Tea Company. You go to the future, where they break up monopolies in the Gilded Age, and Teddy Roosevelt rides the horse of anti-monopolist sentiment into the White House. You go to the breakup of AT&T, and what sadly happened in the last few decades when you have monopoly pharmaceutical companies and everything from cat food to caskets and monopolies, and of course the ultimate example, tech. You simply don't have the kind of competition or pushback from Democrats and Republicans that we used to have. I make the case that is changing right before our eyes because of privacy concerns, because of pharma prices, because of cable prices, all kinds of things. And now is the time to act. And I end the book with 25 great ideas that would get us out of this mess.
And by the way, you also have cartoons in the book. So for people like me who love... So for people like me who love a good picture book, this is also good if you need sort of the release there. But you know what's interesting, sort of the evolution of this topic. I mean, it's very hard to see Republicans and Democrats agree on anything these days, but this is one area you're seeing the most conservative Republicans like Mike Lee, Josh Hawley join support with you and Mark Warner, other individuals on this. But what consequences do we face if we do nothing here? You mentioned that this is now the time to act. What happens if nothing happens?
Well, we're starting to see it when people's privacy is hinged upon, when they are not able to control their own data. The insurrection and all the misinformation that was out there on Facebook, the App Store issue. We literally saw in Australia, Google and Facebook hold an entire country hostage. They basically said to them, you know what, if you want to make us pay for content, we're taking our marbles and go home. We know we're 90% of your search engine, says Google, but you're not going to have one practically if we leave, even though Microsoft offered to stand up. Eventually they back down, but that is what monopolies do. And it is on us right now to do something about it.
Let's talk about the Apple App Store here for a moment, because obviously the court fight that they're having right now with Epic Games in the news, with that 30% cut that Apple takes here. What's your perspective on all of this? Do you believe Apple should basically be bringing that rate down? And are you in favor of Congress getting in here and essentially setting up a set line of what these companies essentially can take in their App Store fees?
Yeah, and if people are looking for some good late night TV, there's plenty of things to watch, but they should look at the hearing that we had, find it on the web, the hearing that we had on the app stores, Democrats, Republicans pushing. At the same time, you had Spotify, Tile, and Match.com making their case. They are paying 30%, up to 30% of the money they bring in from customers on the app stores to Apple or Google, depending on which app store they're in. In addition to that, they cannot even allow, they're banned to tell their customers that they could get cheaper rates by simply going to their websites. And what's happened is the app stores have basically taken over the websites. Everyone still has websites, but we know how much time Americans spend on app stores. About 4 hours a day is the average. And so the case that we've made is, one, yes, you could have Congress intervene. We're looking at that. States are starting to look at it. And you could also, as Europe just did, start taking action. And we could take it from the federal government perspective, so that you have the Justice Department or the FTC weighing in and saying, you can't do this. Yeah, you say this is for security, but now when it's up to 30%. So the Epic Games lawsuit is interesting because they will finally get, I hope, to the bottom of the question that I've asked, that I'm awaiting an answer on: how much money are they really making? In one public filing, Epic Games has suggested that Apple is making a 75% profit. Success is great, but when it starts harming others that are trying to compete, especially Spotify, where Apple is directly competing with them, but then also controlling the App Store where they sell their stuff, that is a classic monopoly problem. And we just can't put up our arms and say, you know, it's too complicated, or you know what, the courts are conservative, so we're not going to do something about it. Again, through time, we have rejuvenated capitalism, especially those who like capitalism. I believe in the private sector. I worked in it for 14 years. I represented MCI when they were taking on the monopolies. So it's time to do it again.
Senator, I want to switch gears and talk about Facebook. Tomorrow, Facebook's going to be making news because their oversight board will rule on if former President Trump will be able to have his Facebook profile reinstated again. What potentially are the ramifications in your mind if the former president is allowed to have his Facebook profile again?
Well, I have made very clear that he is the conveyor of so much misinformation, especially about the election, something that led to the insurrection directly. He incited the insurrection as the House managers made the case so vigorously to the Senate, garnering a number of Republican senators' support for impeachment, as well as for the House of Representatives. And so I don't believe he should be allowed back on that platform. That is for them to decide. But I think when you look at what he has spawned in terms of misinformation on the web, you know, he is the misinformer in chief.
Well, on top of all of that, I mean, so much misinformation on these platforms. I mean, there was a report yesterday in the New York Times, Senator, we may not get to herd immunity because there are so many people out there that don't want to get this vaccine. And
yeah, thank you for bringing this up, Baker. I just did an event with one of our foremost doctors at a hospital in Minnesota, Fairview Hospital. I also had been down at Mayo, where 95% of their doctors have gotten the vaccine, and we are battling now this misinformation. I called on what we call the disinformation dozen, the 12 accounts. I called on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube to take down their accounts, and they actually did some of it, along with Ben Ray Lujan. We forcefully asked for them to take down this account after we saw a study that showed that over 60% of the disinformation is actually started by these 12 accounts. And the idea here is that they're basically not just hurting our economy, not just hurting our democracy, which they've done. They literally, these accounts and people that are passing misinformation, they're basically, people are losing their lives over this. And so it is all on all of us to tell our friends, for those of us that have gotten the vaccine, tell your friends, tell your family members, call them right now. You can still keep watching Cheddar TV. Text them while you're watching and say, have you gotten the vaccine yet? It's safe. I think it's going to be a lot of that. I got one, it's safe, as well as the efforts that we have going on in communities of color, the efforts that we have going on with everything from people's barbers and hairdressers to Dolly Parton. We need to get the word out quickly.
Absolutely. Senator, we could talk for hours on end. It was such a pleasure to have you here. Amy Klobuchar, be sure to check out her book, Antitrust, Taking on Monopoly Power from the Gilded Age, from the Digital Age, also full of cartoons as well. You'll definitely like it. Senator, thank you so much for joining us.